So we come now to the key item, which is the removal of water use restrictions. Can I welcome online? I think we should have Margaret Devlin and John Lamont and Andrew Chin and Megan Tyler for this paper. So welcome to our representative and our lead council officials for this area. And I think if I start off and then I will pass over to Margaret. I'll just double check. Margaret, are you on the call now?
Yes, I am. Your worship.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking leave of the other meeting that you were at to be with us today. We hope that we can do this reasonably expeditiously. If I can just give an outline of where we are on this issue and how we've got to it. You'll recall that about 18 months ago, May 2020 would have been, we had a situation where, after probably the worst drought in our recorded history and then continuing dry weather, our dam levels had dropped to 42%, and on the advice of Watercare, we brought in some reasonably significant stage 1 restrictions on water usage. We were able in, I think, around October, November last year to ease those restrictions, but we still have in place restrictions such as the preventing of the use of water sprinklers around Auckland. I think that what happened was a wake-up call both for Watercare and for Council. We faced, partly because of the demands of growth, but more specifically, the impact of climate change and the more extreme weather conditions that are associated with climate change, in this case drought. We faced the prospect that on the worst case scenario, we may have to temporarily close some businesses because we would not be able to provide them with water, and we might have to bring in some restricted flow of water to our residents. That was a situation that none of us wanted, and that was in a world-class city. And the wake-up call for us was that we needed to do something about our usage and our supply of water, and in particular to make that supply of water more resilient. Today, we are in a position where we are able to lift the last of the remaining restrictions on water use. And as I said earlier, that I think will be welcomed by Aucklanders. We can go into this summer and autumn without the prospect of having to re-establish restrictions on water use, because our dam levels, as of this morning, Margaret, thank you for the 6:30 daily call I get on water levels, are 93.24%. To put that in perspective, that's much higher. Well, that's higher. When I say much higher, that's higher than the average in a normal year. And it's about over 30% up on where we were just 3 months ago. So why are we able to lift the restrictions? First and foremost, after the start of the year, which was again looking to be drier than usual, in September and this month, October, we have had much higher than usual rainfall, and that's been of considerable assistance. On top of that, we have Lake Taupo relatively full, and the Waikato River running at above medium levels, which means that we have additional access to the Waikato should we need it. But the reason that we are confidently able to lift the restrictions on water supply is because of the actions that we took after May next year. And the first of those actions, of course, was the huge effort by Aucklanders. It's just hard to get your head around the figure that Aucklanders collectively have saved more than 20 billion litres of water since May last year. And so a big call out for Auckland residents and businesses for the huge effort that has been made there. And while we might be lifting the last of the restrictions, our message very clearly to everybody is please keep up the good habits that you've developed in not wasting water. Why would you keep those good habits up? Well, of course, it's good for the environment, but it's also good for your back pocket because you're saving money by not wasting water. We're not asking people to scrimp on the use of water, but we're asking them not to waste it. And I think that's something that we will continue to send a public message out through Watercare for them to do. The second reason that we can lift the water restrictions is that we've invested nearly $250 million in improving the resilience of our water supply. And we've created new water treatment plants at Tuakau, at Pukekohe, and at Papakura Hunua. And as a result of that investment, we will be providing, by March of next year, roughly 104 million litres a day more water, or we'll have available 104 million litres more water for use a day than we had previously. And this will be sufficient to cater for growth, and it will be sufficient to cater for the any impact of extended dry weather that might be as a result of the change in the climate change that we are going through. This will not be the end of the changes that we need to make, and we will be looking, as we are in our water strategy right now, at other changes to ensure that we are using our water wisely and that we have an adequate supply of it. I want to acknowledge the efforts that Watercare has made, particularly in stoppings of 9 million litres a day. That's a fantastic outcome. So thank you for the investment that you're making in renewals that has made that possible. We've made it easier for people to access rainwater by removing the cost of resource consent for installing tanks for supply. And we've worked with the construction industry so that the construction industry aren't using on projects that don't require pure water the fully treated water that Watercare provides, but are looking at using non-potable water. Council itself, as a major water user, is learning to manage its water supplies better, particularly with irrigation of sports fields. And I want to acknowledge Eden Park, which has refitted and is reutilising its bore, and in doing that, saving millions of litres of water that would otherwise be used simply for irrigation. And finally, as I mentioned before, we're working on a water strategy which ultimately will look, I hope, at reutilisation of our wastewater so that we're not pouring wastewater into our harbours, albeit really well treated, but we're refining it to the point where it is pure and can be reutilised, and we'll have that sustainability and that circular economy. So with all of those things, I think we should be pretty much unanimously in support of lifting the last of these restrictions. I certainly commend the report to councillors, and it's my pleasure now to invite Margaret Devlin as Chair of Watercare to speak to the paper. Thank you very much, Margaret, and once again welcome to you and our Chief Executive, John Lamont.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. Kia ora koutou, and hope everybody's well in the world of lockdown. And look, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things that the Mayor has referred to in those opening comments. I guess for me and for Watercare, if I can just pull those together to say that, as a result of the measures that the Mayor has outlined, we're entering the summer period in a much stronger position than we were in the last two summer periods. So, just to reiterate that the dams are now currently at 93.3 and rising at about 0.2% per day. So to put some context around that, the last time the dams were at this level were in February 2019. The Mayor has referred to the new water that we've brought on board, and the details of that are in the papers. But again, that's about 104 million litres of water a day, the equivalent of providing a supply to Tauranga, Hamilton and Palmerston North. So just puts the quantum of what's available in some sort of context. And again, the Mayor quite rightly mentioned the fact that that came about because of the additional expenditure of just shy of $250 million to achieve that. So those are kind of the supply side, so augmenting water filling the dams, and the augmentation has also allowed us to rest the dams over the winter, and again put us in that much better position. And again, we talked previously about diversifying our sources, but diversifying the sources around not just relying on the dams, but having that mix of sources, including river water and bore water. And of course, on the demand side, again, the Mayor has mentioned the fact that we have a very proactive leakage detection program running, and out of our 9,000 kilometres of pipes, we have already swept, technical term, apparently about 6,000 of those, and we will continue that work as part of our ongoing management program on the network. And that has delivered, again, these numbers move each time we talk about it, but just over 10 megalitres a day. So again, really emphasising the importance of treating our water as a precious resource. But most importantly, I think in all of this, and again, the Mayor has talked about it, that the customer response has been incredible. So saving just shy of 21 billion litres of water. And again, just some context around that, you may be aware that there's currently a project in Nelson to build a new dam, which is a joint project between council and local irrigators. The size of that dam is 13 billion litres of water, so at a range of costs. So you again, just that's almost time and a half again of a new reservoir. So equally, in terms of our recommendations, the long-range weather forecast, and I know I can't see everybody, but I'm sure I can see and sense a few smiles coming at the mention of a long-range weather forecast. But that also indicates that we are in for a normal summer, whatever that might be, with the likelihood of a Tasman Tempest event probably towards the end of summer. So based on this, Watercare is recommending that the current water restrictions are removed from the 23rd of October. There are a couple of conditions to that recommendation, and they're set out in paragraphs G through I in the papers that you have. And that is that we will continue our ongoing campaign about water and its precious resource and maintaining those good water-saving habits that we've all got used to, and also requesting a delegation of authority to the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, the Liaison Councillor for Watercare and a member of INSB, should it be necessary that we would need to reintroduce restrictions, and that would only be subject to a period of sustained high demand. So finally, Mayor Goff, before handing back to you, it's also worth noting that last week on Friday, Council and Watercare have socialised on a confidential basis the recommendations to a number of our key stakeholders, including the Board of Inquiry panel. The response was appreciation of being advised and acknowledgement of the current supply status. It should also be noted that all of these stakeholders receive a weekly resources update from us anyway. And just finally, on the Board of Inquiry, whilst the consent application, which is currently being heard in front of the Board of Inquiry, isn't actually linked to the drought and the current restrictions, we felt it was prudent and probably just good manners to advise the panel of the recommendations that we were making. So that's kind of my overview, Mayor Goff. Back to you, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And the only disagreement we have, I think, is I chose not to talk about weather forecasting because it has so often been wrong in the past, so I don't rely on it, nor do you, I think, entirely. But we note it, but don't rely on it. Look, I'd like to move these recommendations. Thanks for the offer, Wayne, but this is an important move and one that I've been working towards for quite a long time. And if I can ask Linda Cooper as our liaison officer to second it, what I propose.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I propose to take questions first. And so far I have questions from Desley Simpson, Bill Cashmore, John Watson and Wayne Walker, and Angela Dalton. And Daniel Newman has foreshadowed a comment. So we'll just work through that. If I've missed anybody out, please indicate to me. But we'll start with a question from Councillor Desley Simpson. Desley.
Thanks, Your Worship. In voting, if I was to vote for these resolutions, which I believe I will, can you confirm that that means that the Mission Bay Fountain will be up and operating?
Oh, the cost is too high. I presume that will be the case, but I'm going to defer to Margaret or officers on that.
I think may I also defer to officers on that level of detail?
In the absence of a no, I would say if we're lifting restrictions, we're lifting restrictions, that will include all restrictions. And I know that that's a big thing for the public that visit there. But I'll just give any officer a chance to contradict me if they wish. But I imagine that those restrictions will be lifted as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Megan here. I confirm that we will work on that and understand the direction that you've given us on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Desley. Always a chance to promote the local patch. Right, Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I know it must be your Chair of Finance looking for someone to do the washing.
The Freedom Campus. The Freedom Campus might be able to use it for that.
No, cheek in the cheap seats, thanks.
I just couldn't resist, Desley. Thank you. A very quick question, or two very quick questions. Firstly, to Chair Margaret, the relationship between Waikato Regional Council and Hamilton City Council is absolutely critical. Very briefly, how is that relationship going with water care?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, the relationship at both a governance and an executive level continues to grow. You'll be aware that both the Regional Council and Hamilton City Council have new chief executives. So certainly John has and will continue to engage with Hamilton City Council and the Regional Council. As I mentioned last week, I did speak to the chair of the Regional Council, and he was actually very complimentary about the work that Watercare has done, particularly in terms of the proactive nature of demand management. We have offered to take him on a visit around the Waikato treatment works as and when restrictions allow that to happen. So overall, that relationship continues to develop and continues to grow.
Thank you very much, and I can also confirm I talked to Paula Southgate, Bill, yesterday, and they were very pleased that with the situation we're in, and I thank them profusely for making available their 25 million litres a day unused water consent, and acknowledged that was very, very helpful for the period of time that it was needed.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think the criticality of that relationship is going forward is absolutely of prime most importance for us. It's not a them and us situation. We need to get this right. My second question is to the CE, John Lamont. John, now that we're getting more of our water coming from our dams rather than the expensive pumping and further treatment out of the Waikato, there will be some cost savings to water care in both CAPEX particularly, and OPEX particularly. So those cost savings, are they substantial or immaterial? And if so, either which way, where would they be going to advent other programs such as leaks and prevention and so forth?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. So it's impossible to understate the importance of the water coming out of the Waikato. It's been over half Auckland's water for the past few months, and in the longer term it will remain a component, but just because of the way Auckland is growing and providing that element of resilience. But that water does come at a price because of the fact that it's pumped from the Waikato, as opposed to water coming particularly from Ardmore, which is coming from gravity. So if you look at our budget and our forecast at the moment, we're just reviewing our first quarter budget. You'll see that we're over budget, and now most of that, of course, is COVID costs, but a substantial proportion of that is simply because of the additional costs, operating costs of producing water from the Waikato, which is not where our budget was based on. So what this will do in the longer term as we move to more dam water is that it will help us drive that forecast back down towards budget, which is obviously what we want to do during the course of this year. If we were to make any savings, and I'm not anticipating that we will, because the Waikato will continue to be such an element of our water going forwards, then of course we will plough it into our capital programme, which is ongoing, and it's that ongoing programme of renewals that helps us with leak reduction and makes us into a more efficient system.
Great news. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, John. Councillor John Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just picking up on a couple of these points in the report. Firstly, it's good to hear that you're going to continue your focus on communicating with Auckland as to be water efficient. It's pretty important that that behaviour is embedded going forward, and that's as aggressive as it has been during the crisis. So just in respect of that, you mentioned the further work to more fully understand the implications of climate change on supply sources. What do you envisage as the exact nature of that work to face the climate change impact on our water supply, in the short and the medium term?
Shall I answer that one? So climate change plays a part in everything we think about. In the models that we've got that we use to optimise our water take from the various different sources, we have already introduced everything we know about from the models that are out there that will take us forward for the next 30 or so years. We are working with NIWA and have got a contract with them to develop further their increasing number of global models so that we can refine it still further so that we get even better information. We think about it in terms of where the future sources of water might come from and what our portfolio of water sources might look like so that we don't place total reliance on the dams. We've already had that in the work with Waikato, but also in developing more bores, more aquifers, and thinking longer term about recycled water and what that might look like. So there's all that work that's in place, plus looking at, in terms of climate change, where our facilities are located, how we could be more efficient, and looking at technologies worldwide as well to see if there's any more technological solutions that might help us. And over and above that, the benchmarking that we're doing with Australian and UK colleagues to see how efficient we are is really important to see, can we do anything better? So climate change is embedded throughout everything we do.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, John. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Just got a question around how we make decisions going forward if we have a water shortage. In the past, we've had a decision-making model that's been very much reliant on dam levels. Now that we've got a variety of other sources, we've got much more coming from the Waikato, we've also brought on aquifers and so on, and we've also enhanced our efficiency. Will Watercare be changing its decision-making model so we don't trigger into a drought response when we now have a more robust situation? So you're changing the model?
Perhaps, Councillor Walker, I might make a comment and then pass to John, but it's very insightful because one of the issues we've been discussing at the board table and with management is that you're absolutely right. As we've now managed to diversify and have a much wider selection of sources to use, it is important that the narrative is understood around total water available, and therefore what does that mean to us in terms of our decision making. So perhaps with that context, I'll also pass over to John, who has been engaged much more in detail on this.
Thanks very much, Chair. We've engaged Oricon, who did the original work on the drought management plan, to bring that up to date, because you're absolutely right, Councillor. We've now got a broad portfolio of sources and we need to reflect that. That's just one element of it. So we're looking at total water available rather than just dam storage. And dam storage is now only a component of it. But the other thing is to make sure that we've got the triggers points right, so that we have got the trigger points sufficiently far in advance that we can take action in the right time scale to actually influence things, rather than trigger things just too late. And that's, I think, a lesson from last time. So that work is ongoing now with Oricon, and we'll obviously bring that back to council as that's developed.
The other related question that I've got that goes to this is how we manage the Waikato take. So I would suggest that we've got an obligation to try and reduce that take as much as we can within reason. So that means that we've got a balancing act between having dam storage that's not as high as it might be, but is still reasonable and sufficient going forward, given that I don't know what the relative cost of the Waikato water is. That's one issue, also its quality. But obviously our obligation to the other parties in the Waikato to try and minimise that take as much as possible. So is that also something that you're looking at in terms of the model going forward?
So if I may, Councillor, the answer to that is yes, we are looking at it. I mean, the first thing to say is that we've made a commitment to our colleagues in the Waikato that we will look in the long term at what the future sources are, and we will work with them on that.
Thank you.
I've probably got a supplementary on that. It's going to be a balancing act, isn't it? I mean, water in our dams is money in the bank as a protection against a future drought situation, and there are restraints on what we can pull out of the Waikato in terms of the capacity of the pipeline. The other side of that coin is that the water quality of the water in the Waikato makes it more expensive to treat, and it's also more expensive to pump. So where do you find that fine line between what do you want to leave in the lakes in order to provide that guarantee that if things go pear-shaped and it's really dry in the autumn and early winter, while at the same time using the quality of the water that we have that is cheaper to provide? Where's the sweet spot there?
So it's a balancing exercise, Your Worship. So we use this model, which is ISMM, which gives us various different opportunities to look at. Well, do you run it on a cost basis, or what the weather forecasts are, and it plumps in, well, what are the forecasts coming forward? So what's the right balance? So do you take more water from Hanuas at the moment? Because we've still got issues in the water in the Waitakaris at the moment. So Upper Huia Dam, for example, we still can't use because of that storm at the end of August that gave us a problem. And how do we balance it? So it's an optimization model that allows us to choose what is the best option day to day and week to week, balancing all those items, cost, quality, availability, dam levels, future forecasts, and all the rest of it. So it's a complex model, but that's how it works.
Yeah, I think I understand. We might have a further discussion about that.
Sure.
Okay, next question is Councillor Angela Dalton.
Thank you. And in part, Councillor Walker has asked my question, which was going to be around the triggers for decision making. I looked through the report and I could see that we're going to continue to have some comms and engagements around water efficiency, but I wondered how we would be taking Aucklanders along with us so there is no shock. And when you look at the water care landing page, and it's got that, I guess it's a thermometer, and we're in the green. How those trigger points could relate to the green, orange, and red, and if we were heading towards the orange, how we could ensure that this was going to be more readily available for people to see, a little bit as familiar as the COVID vaccination monitor the Herald has at the moment. So it's something that Aucklanders could regularly see, look at, and it's not so much of a shock if we need to head back to any other restrictions. But it sounds like the work on the triggers is a work in progress at the moment in terms of that decision making.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. Just to add to that, I think you make a very valid point around the fact that water care needs to be more proactive in engaging with our customers as we go forward, and clearly all of our stakeholders, so that it isn't we don't go from everything's okay to we've got an issue. So how do we keep that story and tell that story, particularly around, well, if demand gets to this level, these are the steps that we will have to take. And that again came out of the Auckland report earlier this year, that we needed to be much more proactive in that level of engagement.
Thank you, Margaret, and well done.
Thanks, Angela. Councillor Darby, look, I don't have any problems with taking out the word over the summer. Obviously it'll be an operational matter to determine when you ramp up your communications campaign and when you wind it back a bit. But I imagine there will be an ongoing campaign just to encourage people not to waste water. It's a precious resource. But if you'd like, I'll remove those words with the agreement of my seconder, Linda Cooper.
Yeah,
are you?
I agree, Mr.
Yep.
Chair. I mean, the whole thing around embedding those important, and I don't think we can take the messages away. We've got to keep the pedal to the pedal on this, and keep encouraging good water demand.
No, that's good. Councillor Darby, do you want to add to your question?
No, that's fine. Just a second question, if I can, Mayor.
Yeah,
of John. And thanks for that quick change, Mayor. John, on the smart meter program, the intention is to replace the residential meters. The asset life of a residential meter, I understand, is 20 years, and your asset replacement program factors in about 30,000 meters a year. Where are you currently on the issues you've faced with sourcing a reliable product? I understand that program has been held up, and you are not replacing 30,000 per annum with smart meters at the moment. That may have changed. Can you just, that's also very much part of the water efficiency, ensuring that people know what they're using, etc. So can you just fill us in on that particular issue, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. So our smart program, we've already rolled out about 1,600 smart meters to schools and commercial customers. You're right to say that we want to move to residential customers, and we'd like to ramp that program up once we can get into it to 40,000 a year if we can. We have had problems sourcing them, but we're hoping for the first deliverers in October, November. But current shipping issues are causing us a problem. But as soon as we can and get into it, that's the intent.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Tracy Mulholland.
And thanks, Your Worship, and thank you, everyone. I do hope that you can hear me okay. With regards to just a couple of comments and a question, if that's okay, Your Worship.
Yep. Look, just
comments. Yep.
If you can just hold off the comments, we'll get rid of questions first, and I'll come back to you after Daniel on comments, Tracy.
Great. So mine is just a question around the government's new proposal on enabling the housing supply. Will we be requesting, or will we be putting in the proposal that or our recommendations to government, that those new houses where we have up to 3 homes on what I would call small sections in Ma and Pa development, will we be recommending smart meters be installed to save water in the future and maybe manage water better? Thanks.
That might be a question for Megan Tyler, I think. Megan, have you got any advice on that, or would you like to come back to Councillor Mulholland?
Thanks, Mr. Chair and Councillor Mulholland. We are going to work through that legislative change with Watercare, among others, across the group. My gut feel at the moment is that that matter, the smart meters, won't change the legislation. So in a sense, it's not relevant just to the legislation. But in terms of operational work that we do, and or something we might even put into a unitary plan, that is something we can look at. So my answer is I don't think it's strictly relevant to the legislation, but it's something we'll look at, and I'm happy to come back to you more particularly on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, but I think we should make that recommendation that as part of those new developments, smart meters are installed.
Thanks very much, Councillor. And we come, I think the last question is Councillor Greg Sayers. Greg.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just clarification in the report. There was not a lot mentioned about just increasing the robustness for the households in rural sector when we face a drought. So, just wondering if I could get a little bit of elaboration for us around, what's been completed to increase that robustness and what's planned perhaps for the future as well. Because remember we used the tankers last time, Mr. Mayor. So just perhaps some clarification so we understand what's happening in that space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, sorry, Margaret, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if John wanted to make any comments in respect to that, but perhaps Megan might have an overarching comment.
Well, let's start with Megan and see if John wants to add anything. Megan.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody. Just wanted to just confirm that this is about the water restrictions on the metropolitan system, but so that's the purpose of the report. However, we have been working with Watercare, of course, on the rural sector water supply as well. Andrew Chin is on the line. So, John, if you'd like to make a comment, but if Andrew has anything more to add, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that. So, John, thanks.
So I'll defer to Andrew on this one.
Okay, Andrew.
Hello, everyone. I can confirm that the additional infrastructure that Watercare and Healthy Waters have put in, so a new groundwater-based tanker supply point in Owera and one in Karaka, are up and running, and they will remain available throughout for the long term. There's also additional resources going in to provide advice to people putting in water tanks so that there's better advice about how much storage they should be looking at providing. And of course there's also the recent plan changes to make the regulatory barriers to putting in more rainwater tanks just to help remove some of those barriers to many people. The welfare water at various community halls, there's a number of tanks that have been installed. They're going to be remaining in place over the summer as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. John, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Only as much, Your Worship, that our asset management plan, which is, as councillors will recall, double the size it was only 3 years ago, half of that is about growth, and it's about growing into newer areas and rural areas. So there's an awful lot of long-term planning going into provision of main services out into newer areas.
Thanks very much for that, John. So I have exhausted the question list, so I'll move now to comments. And the first comment is from Councillor Daniel Newman. Daniel.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to acknowledge the board and the senior management from Watercare for the work that they have taken and fronting this over the course of the campaign to conserve, and also Your Worship, to acknowledge your role as Mayor. This has not been an easy time. It's been a very complex wee while in our region's history, actually, for many reasons, and I acknowledge that you've had to front this. But I also, if I may, Your Worship, just also pay a tribute to Watercare's comms and engagement people. I know that Rachel Hughes has worked behind the scenes, and I think that we've been very well informed and updated on a regular basis about water levels from Watercare, and also to Brent Evans, who we will all know, who has, in my view, been quite outstanding and continues to be. My one other comment, Your Worship, would be I believe that the challenges that we face in relation to water supply are not just due to changing weather patterns. It is also about the significant growth that we face in this region, and what appears to be in the future likely to be significant unplanned growth, which is going to place further pressure on the network. I think that water conservation is an important tool in the toolkit to try and help to manage the impact of that, but just to foreshadow that we will need to continue to look at the asset management plan, and it is a dynamic document, and that
there will be a need to look at future water sources, because I have no doubt that we will continue to be under real pressure here, and this is one of those areas where it's not just a gradual change. An investment in new infrastructure is a step change. So thank you very much to everybody who's participated in the campaign from Watercare's side, and also to you, Worship, for having to front a lot of this with the community.
Thank you, Councillor, and it's really nice to be in the position, as I said before, of lifting restrictions rather than continuing them. There's a few other
restrictions, if you could move on those, that'd be great.
If I can also congratulate Watercare on running a somewhat better advertising campaign than the government has on Three Waters. That goes without saying. Councillor Tracy Mulholland, your comments, please.
Oh, thanks, Your Worship. Just with regards to listening to this conversation and debate around decision making, one of the things I've heard is in relation to the great job that Aucklanders have done. Now, they have done a great job, but I just want us to be mindful, please, when we are sharing communications, and it's a thought around how we undertake the thanks to Aucklanders. I feel that Aucklanders might be in a position, Your Worship, where they feel they've been told what to do. So it's just how that's communicated, because Aucklanders have done a great job, but they may sort of, we don't want them to think it's lip service. We want them to understand the reality of the appreciation. I too want to just acknowledge the Board of Management of Watercare, but I want to especially thank Brent Evans, who has been updating me when I've had constituent queries. He's responded very efficiently and effectively on that. And also Andrew Chin has sent information through and helping people understand tanks, because of being in the old Waitakere area, as you'd know. I know I had a small tank on ours, and it didn't, when I put a small place in, and they weren't, you weren't allowed to use it for water in the garden, which seemed ludicrous. So thanks for those changes in relation to this. I also think, with regards to Councillor Newman's comments, totally tutuka, that the future changes and growth, we've got a lot of work to do, and how do we bring our people with us? So savings, smart meters, and how that's communicated, the thanks. That was especially something, Your Worship, that so Aucklanders don't think they're forced, they were forced. We're thanking them genuinely. Kia ora.
No, absolutely, and in the comments that we've made, I've acknowledged, it's he waka eka noa again. The response from people has been fantastic. Next comment, Councillor Richard Hills.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor. Just want to congratulate the Watercare Board, the Watercare staff, and all the contractors who have done significant work. That infrastructure, getting that in with all the COVID delays and staff delays and not being able to bring people into the country and things, is pretty phenomenal. Phenomenal work, all while trying to keep water use down. The other thing I want to do is congratulate Aucklanders, saving over 20 billion litres of water, I think is about 50 days of total use, which is pretty phenomenal to do. So yes, the rain has come, and yes, that our worst and longest drought is over, but part of that is also down to the fact that we as a city save significant amounts of water compared to what we would normally use over the period of this time. So I am really happy that we've been able to remove these restrictions on people's lives, when yes, as Councillor Mulholland has said, there are many restrictions on our lives, and people are feeling like they're being told what to do. But I think what has also changed, and what I've seen, is a real understanding now of, as Watercare claims, water is precious, and that water is a taonga, and that every drop is an important resource that can't be wasted. So I think, and what we did see once we removed the restrictions earlier in the year, or was it last year? Who knows? Time doesn't exist anymore. But when we relaxed some of the restrictions, largely Auckland's water use didn't change that much, and we actually stayed well below, sometimes 30 or 40 million litres below what was kind of the target. So that's pretty phenomenal, and I think people are just thinking of water completely differently since the 90s, we've been able to turn on the tap and largely not think about it. So I think it's great that we have also, as a council, worked with our staff and Watercare together in partnership to have aims for, reducing our water use and ensuring there is no leaks, but also, just continuing those efficiencies right across new builds, and obviously when people, if we have to go to water restrictions again, people understand what they need to do. So I think, although this has been a terrible time, both in COVID and water, I think it will lead us to a better future in protecting our water sources, but also preparing for climate change. So little silver linings within what has been a tough road. So thank you all, and
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And I think it is worth emphasising that the restrictions were less a cause of the reduction in the water use than the voluntary decision by Auckland, as the shorter showers, etc. It's we're not saving a lot through not using sprinklers. It's the other things that Aucklanders took on board, and they weren't compelled, but they were urged. Next comment is Councillor Linda Cooper, please.
Thank you, Worship. There's a lot I won't repeat, but I think, and I won't repeat all the numbers that Councillor Hills always has on hand, and the comments of others around really fantastic staff from both Watercare and Healthy Waters that have come along on this journey with us and supported everything. So I'm going to talk about the Watercare board, and I think probably over a year ago, we weren't saying very good things about Watercare. Probably not all down to them. I think what we've learned is that to listen to our CCOs when they tell us they need money to look after infrastructure or build new, instead of just go sharpen your pencil. We've actually had to bite the bullet and put that money there as a council for building infrastructure and doing those renewals that are sorely needed, because, as we said, water is precious, but it's also what gives life, and we have to have it. So I'm really pleased that we put that $250 million in there, and in the emergency budget and now in the recovery budget, to carry on that asset management that's critical to the lives of Aucklanders. I also want to acknowledge Margaret Devlin's leadership and the new CEO. Watercare now has demand management in its vocabulary, and I know a lot of us, really were encouraging that, but it's absolutely evident now, and that is so good, because, as we know, there's a lot of levers to us having enough water, and all the extra water that's come on, it's good. The other thing is we have the bylaw as the blunt tool to stormwater bylaw. Sorry, the water bylaw is the blunt tool, but the drought management plan, which we've had indicated is being worked on, it was always really just about water supply, but all the levers need to be in that drought management plan, so we can mix and match. So I'm really pleased to hear that is happening, because that is the basis on which we make the decision in the bylaw when it comes to the governing body. And just lastly, acknowledge Watercare as well. They just haven't had to manage this. They've got one of the largest projects going in the country alongside CRL with the Central Interceptor, and that has been really tough. And the senior management and the board have managed to keep things going under tough conditions, with not being able to get people into the country to work on it, people wanting to leave because they're missing their families overseas, all of those things, and at the same time managing the great messages out to the public, keeping the projects going, and making sure we've got enough water. So I just want to commend the work they've done alongside our council staff.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we'd all endorse those comments. Councillor Shane Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. My previous colleagues have really done a great job on pumping the tyres of all involved, and I sort of don't need to just add too much more to their words, because they are fantastic, and I just endorse them. But look, this, as Councillor Cooper was saying, we were in a situation where we were none too happy about a lot of things relating to water in the last year and a half. But this goes to show that in the interesting times we have with Three Waters and the housing changes that have recently been announced, that although no governance system is perfect, the public should actually have confidence that we can step up. And I mean we, as in Watercare, as in the governing body, and actually the Auckland public at large, that when something is communicated to them like water restrictions, they'll step up and do the right thing. And that's a fantastic sort of thing that we should all feel really heartened by, and that Auckland should feel heartened by. And in my opinion, look, I'm speaking personally, I think the housing changes are fantastic in a lot of ways. There's a lot to like about them. But it will mean new challenges for water. And just in line with what I've just said, this shows that water shouldn't be an issue when encouraging the type of housing that Auckland needs, because we do have the capacity to step up and step in when we need to. That also that we're in a position to address the challenges of climate change when we need to step up, and we're sort of appreciating that we need to do that now, I think. So this is Watercare, governing body and the general public. We can all step in when there is a crisis, and I think this is a really good episode of that, and something that I think we should feel really happy about as Aucklanders. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor. And the last comment is from Councillor Chris Darby.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Margaret and John and all those involved over the last 18 months to turn this around. I guess we've seen this drought off, and we've seen these water shortages off, but we can't be content, remotely content, that we've got this handled long term. We've got a lot of work in front of us, and I guess we've got the lesson of seeing Tasman tempests sweep past and not taking that opportunity, which we've all woken up to. But we've got a long journey in front of us, and a long journey to become a true water-sensitive city, a sponge city, like we need to be. These are enormous challenges, and this is just the prelude. And the big one that's keeps staring at us, of course, is this climate change world that we are now well into. And it will be throwing up more droughts and more Tasman tempests. And that's just the fact of it. And we've got to be prepared for that, because our people are reliant on our leadership in this space. And I don't have any doubt now that we are on the path to demonstrating that we are going to be a very different city when it comes to valuing and treasuring water going forward. You know, the Three Waters reforms highlight this as an enormous challenge. There's merit in many aspects of the Three Waters reforms. There's a massive liability staring at us here, but we just cannot and will not take our eye off this ball. We've got work to do, and that's probably my message to myself as a governor of this city, that we've got a long journey in front of us. But I do reflect on the great work that has been undertaken by us all in the last 18 months. Cheers, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Look, I'll put it to the vote now, and then after we've voted, I'll just invite a final comment from Chair of the Board of Watercare. But we'll put the vote. All those in favour, I'll do it on the voices. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
To the contrary, no. And can I record that as being a unanimous vote? Nobody wishes to have their vote recorded against it. Yes. Thank you very much. I declare that carried. And just before I wind the meeting up, Margaret, if you'd like to make a final comment, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, councillors, for your support. I think certainly over the last 18 months, it has brought about a number of challenges for us, and I guess, as many people say, never waste a good crisis. And we have actually, as Councillor Darby has said, we have a long road ahead of us, but I would like to thank Auckland Council, and particularly yourself, Mayor Phil, for the support that we've had over the last 18 months. Fair to say, as with any family, there have been some tensions, but we've worked our ways through it. And I think we're in a much better place today. And so again, thank you for the support that we have received as we've navigated our way through some very challenging times. And thank you very much for the comments that you've made for the staff, and we will ensure that they are passed on to them.
Thanks, Margaret, and if you can pass on our acknowledgement of the board and its role in this. And I do want to thank again John Lamont. John, it's been great having you on board, and it's certainly, I think, made a really positive difference to the way that Watercare is going. So congratulations on the job that you're doing, and we look forward to that continuing relationship.